This is Amadou Onana. You go to the NBA, you go to European football. Players always have ambition to play for the most successful clubs. Players more often than not don't like to confront harsher or more tumultuous periods and prefer to put that behind them by forcing a move away or not considering a team in such a state. Though, when news emerged prior to deadline day that 21-year-old Onana had rejected a Chelsea move to help fight for the Toffees' survival, Everton fans held newfound respect for a player who's already shown glimpses on top of his already profound impact on the pitch amongst a team who's generally seemed lost for most of the season. He's carried this energy after the Arsenal game both on the pitch and in the tunnel. He also held the same sentiment in a post where Onana said #ain't leaving the ship, but I pay more attention to the quote above. Said what I said and did what I did. Whilst on the surface this simply means he said he would stay and he did, I find a different meaning behind it. All season long, it's been about words not evolving into action. Onana's performance against Arsenal was nothing short of spectacular, and he most definitely spoke not with words, but action. With that said, no matter how much money is offered for Amadou, in the case we stay up, he must not, at any cost, be sold. And here's why. Onana's game can be statistically noted through him amassing 46 touches, 8 ball recoveries, 2 key passes, 4 tackles won, and a number of other notable stats. But it goes much deeper than that. Martin Odegaard, pre-game, had scored the most goals for any Arsenal player away from home this season with 6, and has been a leader from the front, especially on the attack. This graph here indicates he's basically in a league of his own, with the high percentage chances he's had, and the goals he's converted from that. But Onana had restricted him from any form of impact on the game, to the extent he would be taken off as the game exceeded the final quarter of an hour. This was done through smart positioning that Dyche's compact game plan encourages. Consistently defensively, Onana would be the one midfielder, sitting in front of the back four in a 4-1-4-1 formation. Though constant pressing, usually by Doucouré on Arsenal defenders especially early on, would mean Onana would push up to fill the gap to create a 4-4-2. But here, you can see the shape of a 4-5-1, and Onana, who had been consistently looking over his shoulder in the early going to see Odegaard's whereabouts, cuts this pass off with excellent early anticipation. And he's not afraid to keep the passing dynamic. You can see Gana Gueye is that mid in front of the back four here to cover Cody, who's off screen. But yet again, Onana's ability to identify where the ball is headed and the assurance in an already smart footballing brain means yet again Odegaard can't get the ball in a dangerous area. In this situation, Onana's pressed up a little bit higher. The compactness in the middle corridor of the pitch meant Arsenal were often suffocated, and even with Onana higher up the pitch, Gana Gueye, McNeil and Tarkowski don't give Odegaard any room to move, except a pathway right into the Onana challenge, which then sends Everton on the attack. If we look at some key metrics and where Amadou registers in terms of percentiles, Amadou is right up there in tackles and getting dribbled past. Dyche ball, where you're responsible for covering space and making it difficult for oppositions to manufacture opportunities, Amadou's skills we've mentioned complement this well, and thus it's no surprise he performed exceptionally in shutting Odegaard down. If we look at Onana's pass completion, it's also up there. For a young player like Onana, it's so admirable how he always wants the ball at his feet, wants to be crafty and creative. If we analyse his movement, it's always positive. Pass, move, and command the ball again. He feels a bit let down if he gets burnt by one of his teammates. This leads me into another attractive trait of Onana's game, his IQ at his age. Everton this season have been careless in possession, but simply going back, as opposed to trying to bite off a risky pass, is good composure by him. He just checks his run, so Dwight McNeil isn't boxed in the corner, and if Ben White wants to go over there and trap him, Onana is thereabouts for a bailout. Here, there's a couple of things he does right. Touch is incredibly heavy and he flags trouble. He remains stable to keep upright and shielding the ball and to protect the space. And Partey, sensing a window for Arsenal to break through an exposed Everton defence, which we know didn't happen all that often, commits the foul being overzealous. If we go back to percentiles, Onana loves to draw fouls. Though immediately Amadou gets back up and senses Arsenal are napping, and immediately spreads and progresses the play. Now, remember what I said about Amadou being impenetrable. No one can dribble past him and he's a tackling machine. These metrics go hand in hand. Given he's an imposing figure, he often promotes mistakes or stunts any form of build-up. In the Arsenal game, this was properly evident. As we've mentioned, Amadou plants himself in front of Odegaard. The play evolves, but not really, because Partey leaves the door ajar, and Onana stretches in and sends them further back, and then blocks the pass back to Partey or Ben White. This is what we call perceived pressure. Partey isn't exactly close to Onana, but he knows he's there and the impact he's had to this point in the game. So they go back and an error ensues. Once again, Onana closes down quickly, the pass is wayward to Odegaard, and what we've commonly seen is for a player of his stature, with his mobility, his long strides, means he can cover space rapidly and bring more pressure onto the ball carrier. Here, he uses the pace and long strides to lose Odegaard. And we've talked about IQ. This pass was nearly centimetre perfect, and he pulled the trigger at the perfect time. In past games, there's no numbers and we send it in, the quality's poor, or the number 9 hasn't positioned himself well. Everything here was well executed in the build-up with cohesion. Once again, the length and long strides in play. Amadou's pressed up later in the contest more, given DCL subbed out and there's not much of an aerial focus with Mope. Yet, once again, the cogs are working, and he identifies a potential danger and cuts it off at the source. But it's the bit that follows in the sequence. We've lost the ball. Odegaard has been shit scared all day, and Onana simply sticking one leg out means Odegaard is trapped and he commits the error, fumbling it out of play. Last one. You can see Arsenal have had to try and navigate their way out of a close quarter situation. They do well, but Onana we've seen has elite anticipation and knows when to peel off. On this occasion, it looks like they've found their way out stringing passes together, but Onana holds it up once and then pushes them backward twice. Now, we move on to his craft with the ball. We've discussed it plenty, but for a player of his build, his craftiness is crazy. Here, a little dink over the top changes the complexion of the possession because he's unpredictably flung the play in the other direction. The same thing happens with this crazy direction change, spin, fake thing. The awareness to know Doucouré's whereabouts is underrated on this possession too. And as we mentioned earlier, he sprints forward, he demands it, and he gets frustrated when he doesn't. But seconds later, that work rate is rewarded as he ends up with it anyway. The skill is impressive in isolation, but doing it at his height makes it a marvel. Now, we've banged on about him being 195 centimeters tall and how fascinating it is the way he glides across the pitch. But if we go back to metrics, one of his major assets is the aerials he wins, and the percentage of those, whilst not as high, indicates the high volume he gets as a result of his height. Now this, throughout the season, has been maximised through corners, as Onana has been put on the front post. Oppositions either need to test their luck with something inventive or have to try get the ball over him to get it into a dangerous spot without it being averted. And that's easier said than done. Against Arsenal, the only threat we saw from corners were ones that were sent outside of the 6-yard box. This isn't limited to the defensive side either. Offensively, he becomes a focal point in open play from lofted passes or from corner kicks. Tarkowski scored the goal, but the replay had me convinced it was headed for Onana. And if I progress the footage, it seems like Arsenal had the same thought process. He doesn't need to actually have a touch to have an impact because he instills plenty of worry into the minds of the opposition. And this play I absolutely adore and love. Any football fan can watch this and be proud. It's basically a combination of everything we've said, but if you threw an excessive work rate into the mix on top of that. First, the creativity to swerve away from the defender and move the play rapidly forward. Lose it, slide in, and then bait 2 defenders into knocking it out of play. We talk about action speaking louder than words. After Everton Southampton, he posted on Instagram, "Giving up is not an option." And here's the action. The resilience he showed despite being disadvantaged multiple times on the play, which he was then able to conquer over, is amazing. And the crowd's reaction represents the appreciation for that effort and hustle. This play is almost an excellent analogy for what we hope the season turns out to be. The disadvantage being the first half of the season, and then him wrestling back control is the back half of the season, with the fans on the team's side. Onana's passion on the day was excellent to see, and it's clear that he has the team in his best interest. One Evertonian post-game had this to say about Amadou. If I'm Sean Dyche, I'm sitting Onana down and telling him I'll make him the captain of a sleeping giant that's about to enter into a beautiful new stadium, and I'm going to build a team around him. Encourage him to be the man. Whilst not all of this admittedly is true, Everton must have this in mind. Amadou has proven to Evertonians what the club and the fans mean to him. He's embraced responsibility, he's loved the spotlight, and he hasn't backed down from struggle. Amadou, despite his youth, has shown maturity beyond his years. And whilst he offers a bit of everything on the pitch that stems from his tall, lanky frame, I can't help but think that the mental side of things is where I would look to first when considering a long-term deal. Honestly, what's not to like about Amadou Onana? Everton, if you're serious about being Everton Football Club, sign this man up long term, because he is one of us.